Awesome. Thank you and welcome to those of you in the room and also to our friends who are streaming online. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Lisa Necrason. I'm from Career Development and I am the Industry Outreach Liaison for our business degree programs. And here with me today, if you will help me put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Sebastian Krys. Hopefully you've all done a little bit of your research, but Sebastian is an award-winning producer and engineer. He has quite a few career highlights, not the least of which is the fact that he has collected about 17 Grammys thus far. He's also amassed a resume that's made him very well known and respected in both the Latin and pop music markets, but he isn't quick to put himself into any one category, and I hope we get it to talk about that a little bit more today. I'm gonna kick off the conversation real quick with a few questions, and then I'm gonna volley the mic out to you. So if you're preparing your question, as soon as I volley it out to you, just raise your hand, we'll get you a mic. Great, we good? Good to go? Awesome.
Can you guys hear me?
Everybody can hear us? Good, thank you. And thank you for your patience this morning, you guys too. All right, so we're gonna start talking a little bit about life after Full Sail. So I like to kick it off, Sebastian, with what your career preparation was like in your final days here at Full Sail. What were you thinking about?
Actually, 2 weeks before I graduated, my dad had a heart attack.
Oh.
So all my preparations went out the window.
Yeah.
Which is what happens, you know, you make plans and then everything gets derailed. So initially I wanted to go home for a little bit, try to work in whatever to get some money and then go out to LA or New York. This was back in 1992. When my dad had the heart attack, all that went out the window. I moved back home and really just started looking at opportunities in Miami where you know, my parents lived. So yeah, it was a pretty challenging time, you know, personally. And you know, I remember when we got the news, I wanted to come home right away. He was actually on a flight to Germany when it happened, so he was in Germany, and I wanted to come home, be with my sister and my mom, and he just said, stay in school, finish up, and then you know we'll figure all this out. So yeah, it was you know, life throws stuff at you all the time, as I'm sure you know it does to everybody in this room.
That's intense. And thank you for being so candid with us. I'm sorry that happened at the very
end. It sucked.
Right. Wow. So you were in Miami then when you got started, and you obviously had to deal with a heavy family situation.
Right.
So you're in Miami, you're getting started. What was your first gig?
I got an internship at Crescent Moon Studios where I was there for 12 years. And the way I got the internship, I didn't know anybody in the entertainment industry.
Wow.
You know, like I'm sure a lot of you, how many of you have connections in entertainment? And yeah, not many. So back then, pre-cell phone, you know, Yellow Pages. Actually, a friend of mine brought a Mix magazine and it was on the cover of Mix magazine. He said, you should check this place out. I got the phone number and I called every day for about 3 months until I got past the receptionist and was able to get an interview. And then I got an internship, did not get hired right away. And I was about a month after the internship where they called me at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, can you come in and cover for an assistant that has to go on the road? So that was, yeah, it was persistence, mainly, stalking.
Persistence and stalking,
Yeah.
or perseverance, and also being there for the 4 o'clock phone call to be able to save the day in the moment to get back and land that.
Well, my mom, I was living at home and you know, the house phone rang because there were no cell phones. And you know, she brought the cordless phone. She's like, it's for you. You know? and they said, can you be here, you know, in the next hour?
Wow.
And the answer was, of course, you know.
Do you remember what the project was?
I don't. I don't remember what it was. I remember walking into the studio and it was so loud that I almost vomited because I was asleep, and you know, so it was just too much. I had to take a moment and then go back in.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So you can see there's lots that happen. Every one of us has a different path as we're getting close to graduation and preparing for that path, the blueprint to kind of land your career dreams. Think about those experiences that Sebastian and those hurdles that he went through to get to where he is today. Does anybody have any questions just from the first couple things that we just started talking about? I'd love to get the microphone out to you. Great, right here in the front row. Hi, could you tell us your name and your degree program?
No.
You can use my mic if you need to.
Testing one.
Here we go.
Hello? All right.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Jay. I'm in the recording arts program. I'm considering going to Miami after I finish school as well. I want to dig into the Latin music. What did you do during the time that you were interning?
I learned how to make Cuban coffee. I made a lot of coffee. I walked engineers' dogs. I picked up equipment, picked up people from the airport. I did pretty much anything and everything that was asked of me. I did very little audio work. You know, it was mainly just grunt work, and I'll put it to you this way, and I always tell this to interns that come in. You know, I had to get food orders. Food is a huge deal when you're working. It's like it's you get to the studio and the first question anybody asks is, "Where are we eating today?" Because nobody can make up their mind. So think about, and this is the way I thought about it, was if I get the food order wrong, you know, if the engineer or the producer or the, you know, well-known artist that's there asks you for whatever insane thing they're asking you for, if you get that wrong and they can't trust you with that, they'll never trust you with their music. It's that simple. So for me, it was, you know, it was knowing what people wanted, knowing what people needed, anticipating what it was that they wanted in the sessions to make. I mean, it's when people are working, it's part work and it's part hospitality. So you want to make that experience as seamless for them as possible. I remember working on a Christmas record, and like Christmas albums are generally done in May, June, July because they got to come out on Christmas. So I was, you know, as an assistant, I went out and found a bunch of Christmas decorations and decorated the studio. And it wasn't anything that was asked of me. And then, you know, the producer was Phil Ramone, who, you know, may rest in peace, but he's a legend. And, you know, when he walked in and there was a little Christmas tree and there were Christmas lights, it's like, okay, we're making a Christmas record. And it's Miami in July, so it's not, you know.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to know, like, what you did during the time that you were interning to, like, sustain yourself, like, how to pay your bills and stuff like that. Did you have a job, or were you just 100% in the studio?
I just scrounged, honestly. I did some roadie work. You know, I would take some roadie gigs, but I was in the studio all the time. I mean, it was 3 months, and I just hand to mouth. I mean, you know, whatever. And my parents at that time, you know, my dad was losing his business because he was sick, so it wasn't like we came from money or anything. But it was, the guy I just hired, who's my assistant, been my assistant for a year and a half, his name's Duarte. He's a Full Sail grad. The reason I hired him is, at the end of the interview, I asked him where he was living. And he said, "I'm living in a house with 28 other people." Okay, and I was like, "Okay, you're hired," you know. And that's what it takes. I mean, it's anything and everything you can think of. And it was an unpaid internship, so it wasn't, you know, I wasn't getting any income from there. It was just whatever I could do to make ends meet, you know. Obviously, having a place to crash, you know, was very, very helpful. But you can get creative like Duarte did. Luckily, he's no longer living in a house with 28 other people. He just has 2 roommates now. But
Thank you.
Hey, how long did you say you called every day for? 6 months?
no, it was about 2.5 months.
2.5 months.
Yeah.
Did you ever get?
305-663-8924. I still remember the number. Yeah.
Did you ever get any verbal sign or anything from the receptionist that indicated you were getting through or getting anywhere?
No, what happened was I kept calling at different times, and the day I got the interview, she was late. So the studio manager answered the phone. So, you know, so that's the persistence part. Because she just thought I was, as the studio was owned by Gloria and Emilia Stefan, so she just thought I was a Gloria Stefan fan, you know, who was calling the studio because I wanted to meet, you know, and I would tell her what I was calling about, but it just didn't get through. And eventually she, you know, was late. So, yeah.
So good. The persistence, that whole perseverance. I need to get another mic. We had another question right here. It's okay. No problem.
Hi.
Can you tell us your name and your degree program, please?
Check, check.
Hi, my name's Haley. I'm in entertainment business.
You speak up.
Sorry. So you went through a lot, and I want to know if there was anything that motivated you during those negative obstacles you went through.
You know, the thing about going through a lot is you still go through a lot. That never really ends. You know, it's the entertainment business. It's not a steady job. Number one, I don't like wearing suits. So you guys laugh, but it's a big motivating factor. I like being able to go to work like this, you know, and this is me going to work dressed up. Usually it's me in like slippers, you know, going down to my studio. Really, it's all I wanted to do. That's really it. You know, it was just a matter of, the way I looked at it was, you know, I looked at it year by year. If at the end of the year I'm in the same place or doing a little bit better, then it's okay. You know, and I just kept on looking at my growth. And the couple of times where I got stuck, I just thought, okay, I need to, you know, make a change. Or I would talk to my boss and said, well, if this is as far as I'm going to get here, then I'm going to look for something else. I was pretty clear that I needed to just keep growing. Even if there were small incremental growths, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it was, you know, interning, and it was 4 or 5 years of assisting, and then starting to engineer. And when I say engineer, very grunt work, engineer type work. So it was a very steady, slow growth in my career. It wasn't like one day, you know, the engineer, you hear these stories of so-and-so didn't show up and you're sitting there with Michael Jackson and you do a mix and it's a #1 record. Like, that's not how it happened for me. It was very, very slow and steady. So it's just keeping at it and not letting those moments that are really tough, you know, when it feels like nothing is happening, you just have to. The other thing I did a bunch of work for free. I would go out and find local artists. I can't tell you how many albums for free I've done. I mean, they're in the dozens, where I would just go out and see bands and see artists and say, let me produce you, let me engineer, you know, while I was an intern or an assistant. And that also helped me get a reputation around town, and insert myself into a scene. So that was, and interestingly enough, a lot of the guys I worked with in that scene ended up, like one guy is now the head of Warner Chappell of the whole Latin region. Another guy produced the Latin Grammys last year as a television producer. And they were, you know, like bass players in the scene or managers for a local band. It was just, you know, building a network of actual peers as opposed to trying to insert myself into a network that was sort of above me in what they were doing. It was just surrounding myself with people that were at the same stage as I was and really coming up with them. You know, but that's it. You just keep your head down and keep working. You know, there's no shortcut to that. You know, the one thing I do want to tell you guys, which I I think is really important when it's time for you to get out of here is the one question nobody ever asked me, which is the question that I hope I get asked in a job interview is, when I look for an entry-level position, I want to look for someone to do all the things I don't like doing. So if you go into an interview and you ask them, what is it that you don't like doing? And let me do that for you. Like I don't like installing software. I don't like putting 37 character codes in to see if a plugin will work. I'd rather pay somebody to do all that stuff, deal with all those things. So if you can figure out, that's what entry level is. Entry level is all the crap nobody wants to do. So if you tell people from the beginning, hey, I really want to do that stuff. I want to walk your dog and make your coffee and do all these things. You'll get in. You'll get your foot in the door, and it's just important to get your foot in the door.
I feel the need to amplify what he just said. I think I saw a few people writing it down in front, but that was perhaps one of the greatest gems Sebastian could give everybody. If you can ask in an interview, what is it that you don't want to do? It's setting up your mind frame, your outlook as how can I serve in this position in the best way, and that is huge. Thank you, Sebastian. I'm so glad we're recording this. So what is it that you don't want to do?
Question.
Yep.
Hi there. We have an online question from Jasmine, who's in entertainment business program. She asked, how would you recommend going about networking and building relationships with industry professionals outside of the state that you're currently in?
It's really tough. I mean, and I say it's really tough because for me, it's very hard to, and I didn't understand it when I was a student. I understand it now that I employ people. It's really hard to make a commitment to somebody. Like, you don't want that as an employer on your shoulders, somebody moving across country or to another city and then feeling the responsibility for that person's livelihood if things don't work out. Obviously, we didn't have social networks when I was coming up, and that is such a huge advantage that everybody here has. But as professionals, you kind of have to make the leap and make the commitment to go where it is that you want to be. It's very rare that you're going to get somebody to hire you out of state or out of the city that you don't live in. Just because of that, because you just feel, if this doesn't work out, this person made this huge sacrifice to come and work for me, and now I no longer need them, or things in our industry change. You kind of have to set yourself up to make that move. I mean, there's not an easy answer to that. And I want to tell you guys a little anecdote about not my last assistant, but the previous one, about doing the work that nobody wanted to do. He was a musician. His dream was, to produce, but he was a drummer at heart. He came into the studio. He stalked me on Facebook. I gave him an interview, and I said, listen, I'm going to hire you for nothing of what you want to do. I need you to deal with my computer, software, print passes, all these other stuff. He got his foot in the door. I now co-manage him and his partner. He's the guy who produced Despacito. So it does, getting your foot in the door, I can't explain to you how important it is anywhere. It's just you want to be in it, not outside of it, trying to look for the perfect situation. I'm sure that wasn't his dream job, wasn't picking people up from the airport and installing software on my laptop. But he's at the moment, he's charging a lot more money than I charge for production, and as he should be. So it's really important to just come out of school, be humble, and make sure that you're willing to put in the work.
Got to get in the game. Just want to answer one more thing for the last question online is the alumni network on LinkedIn is huge. You can access our page that's got over 80,000 connections. And so you can at least start building the network before you get there. But Sebastian's right, especially in LA, if you want to work in LA, you got to take the leap of faith and get there. I think I saw some hands up over here, just in the front row. Do you want me to?
Hello. Hi, I'm Tim from Recording Arts. I have a few questions. What do you say when you call the studio? Like, when you first pick up, what do you tell them? Like, do you introduce yourself, say you want to go for an internship? And what do you have in your portfolio to show the studio? Like, what do you prepare?
Well, back then we didn't have portfolios. So when I called the studio, I just said, I'm studying recording engineering, because they won't know what recording arts is, and I'm looking for an internship. I'd love to send you my resume, speak to the studio manager, and then you send the resume. You wait a day or two, and then did you get my resume? And then you wait a day or two, and then have you looked at my resume? And then you work, it's like, what did you think of, and the reason I say persistence is because say you send your resume and so you're not looking for anybody. If the moment you're looking for somebody, if you're calling back, and following up, then all of a sudden, a week later, an assistant quits or an intern quits or a runner quits, then what wasn't true a week before is now true. And that's why it's so important to just sort of keep, in a very nice way, just keeping in touch with people. It's very simple. Out of sight, out of mind. It's very true. If you're not there persisting, if you think that sending one resume and calling one time is going to get you there, a lot of it's timing. So, honestly, about portfolio, I think the portfolios is more for you guys than for, like I said, nobody's going to really care what it is that you do initially musically. You could be, a genius like, the guy I hired who was, amazing at what he does. But that's not what I needed him for. So I didn't really care. I cared more about his attitude, his work ethic, being on time, being prepared. I didn't really care about him as a musician or producer. I learned as we spent time together how great he was. But that takes time. He had to get the food orders right first in order for me to trust him later on with productions, and and he's the same way with the people he hires now.
I have one more. So you said you went around doing a band, like producing bands and stuff for free. So when did you start asking the artists to pay you? And like, how do you go about doing it?
Well, I first asked for them to pay me with food. But what I would do with the bands that I was working with the bands for free, but I did deals with them where I owned the masters. So if something happened with the band, then, it's only fair. You have to have some sort of percentage or ownership. Nothing ended up happening with any of those artists that I was working with at that time. But, from the very beginning, it was an approach. It's like, listen, this isn't going to cost you out of pocket, but we either have co-ownership of this material or I have ownership of the material. You can use it and release it, or I have a percentage. You figure out a way to work it out. So it was always a business relationship. Later on, I just started getting work. It just sort of happens, and it's very different when you approach somebody, hey, I want to, let me produce your local band, or when somebody, approaches you and said, I want you to work for, for me. So it happens. The transition is natural, but it was always, at no point was it informal. Sometimes there were contracts, sometimes it was verbal, but business was always talked about.
Right behind you, bro. Right behind you.
Hi, my name is Frank Holland. I'm studying RA. I just want to thank you for your time. So my question is, as an assistant, how do you know when to ask questions? And when you do ask those questions, how do you know which questions to ask and which ones to learn on your own?
As an assistant, you generally just keep your mouth shut and sit in the back of the room and don't ask questions. The short answer is never in the middle of a session, never in front of a client. If you get, if you're like in a mix session and the next day you have a question about a particular thing that an engineer did, do it before the client gets there. Generally speaking, engineers are really quick to, or producers are really quick to share information if they see that you're interested in what they're doing. If somebody, and you may want to know how they did something so that you don't do it, but you don't want to let on for that. Hey, how did you do that? It's okay, make sure you never do it that way. But you really want to, you're there to do a job, and just being in the studio, if you pay attention, you can learn a lot. And I've learned a lot from my assistants. I mean, you just have to understand what the dynamic is, especially, sometimes things get tense or people are in the zone. It's very important to really become a fly on the wall when you're there. But I learned a ton just being in the room and watching people work and watching people interact. How engineers or producers would deal with, with unfortunate situations like, consoles blowing up or, artists getting a fax that they were getting divorced or whatever it is, at the moment. It all happens. I mean, you're in the studio 24 hours a day, life happens. But generally speaking, you want to stay quiet and do it in times, when you're not in front of a client. And always remember your position. Don't step on anybody's toes. You'll rise up a lot quicker if you're not sort of bullying your way through. And listen, that's just my experience. I'm sure if you talk to, 15 or 20 other Hall of Famers, they'll tell you the opposite.
Well, I love the clarifying never in front of a client. That's pretty universal. I think if you have to ask a clarifying question about your job to make sure that you're doing exactly what they asked of you, that's never a bad question.
Right.
But beyond that, yeah, it's best to...
No, or if you see something going wrong technically, you don't want to shout it out. You go up to the engineer. Like I've had assistants really save my ass. They just come up to me and they go, "Hey, you're feeding this two signals into these." I'm like, cool, thanks.
On the down low.
Yeah.
Good question. Right here.
Hi, my name's David. I'm in creative writing. I was just wondering what you're talking a lot about, like work ethic in the people that you hire. So, what do you define as work ethic?
You're the first one there and the last one to leave, pretty much. I mean, you just, you take initiative. It's a hard. That's a really good question, but it's you kind of know when when you meet somebody and they want it really bad and they're willing to do, all the things that it takes to get to where you want to go within reason and, but it's people that really, have their act together. I mean, all of this comes down at the end of the day to attitude, being on time, being prepared. You ask about asking questions. If you're an assistant and they tell you to do 10 things and you don't know the answers to 8 of them, then you ask questions. Being engaged, not being on your, on your phone, all day long when you're in a session. You just know. It's hard to find good people, and it's really hard to find people that, you shouldn't have to, as an employer, motivate somebody. You know, they should be really motivated. They should be really eager. They should really. You can tell when somebody wants it bad, and you give those people chances. You know, because they're willing to put in the work, and the work doesn't end. You know, when your session ends. I mean, when I started out, I was, again, working, doing the 10 or 12-hour shift in the studio, and then I was looking at bands, and if I had a day off or weekends off, I was in the studio with bands working. It's just, you just know that they're hustling. I mean, people who hustle, that's why when people ask why is there so much crappy music, it's because generally people who hustle really hard get their stuff made. It's not really I've met a lot of incredibly brilliant, genius, talented, lazy people. And they don't get anywhere, and it's a shame because you meet these people that have just this God-given gift, and, they just, they're like ball scratch world champions,
Oh, man, that's a hashtag, right? Okay, so we have a question online. We got to be mindful of time. We're down to about 5 minutes.
So quickly, Leanne from Creative Writing, she said, how do you draw the line between being persistent and being bothersome, or is there a line?
I don't know if there's a line. I think you always have to be respectful. I've had people be persistent, and I'm pretty clear about yes or no. And then, they send, or I don't get back to them because, you're busy or whatever it is. And then you get a very angry message about, you think that and it's like, no, I have, 2 kids, a dog, a cat, work. Like, this is not your life is not my priority. But I think you just always keep it respectful. And, that's the key. But you don't really, no to me means not right now in the context of trying to find a job or work, In other contexts, it actually means no. But in this particular one, it's not the right time.
That's a great answer. I usually like to say once every 3 weeks, if you're coming into career development, that might be my advice. And if you're leading with something I know you're super busy, just wanted to say hi, remind you I'd love to make your life easier, wanting to work, be part of your team. And you can always attach a resume and cover letter with any little email outreach or something, but make it a super easy breezy, one sentence, just wanted to say hi.
Yeah, keep it short.
Yeah.
Anytime I get a message and I don't read it.
Yeah. Well, you guys, this has been an incredible conversation. Do you want to do one more question? You have it in the back? Okay, we do have time for one more. Great.
How you doing? My name is Eric. I am in entertainment business. I'm actually an online student who happened to join today. If I were to put in a resume or reach out and I said I was a Full Sail graduate online, would that make a difference to you? Or do you think that if you were a student in school, that would be more meaningful?
For me personally, no. The important thing for me is that you're a student. Because if you're a student studying something, post high school, then I know that you're serious about it. And it doesn't really make a difference for me. And I've actually taken some online courses from Full Sail, so I know how thorough they are. So I'm pretty aware of what the program is. But no, not particularly. I think it's. I would probably ask you in the interview why online as opposed to going, and I'm sure there's a logical answer. But no, I think that anybody who seeks out and gets access to education and what they want to do that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, I would have loved to have gone to school in, New York, but, this is where I went because this is what I wanted to study. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we understand, too, the online learning experience is different, but can be more challenging. So that's in your favor in a lot of ways, too. So all great questions. Want to thank you all so much for being part of this today. And let's give Sebastian a big, huge thank you. And enjoy the rest of your Hall of Fame. Happy Hall of Fame, everybody.
Yeah, have fun. We'll be around all week.